I remember while playing Dark Souls 1 Remastered for the first time earlier this year, I had an extremely hard time with Manus. Pretty sure I died more times to Manus than to Orphan of Kos from Bloodborne. At the time, it was a very disheartening experience, taking into account I played and finished all the other games. At that point, I quit. I, who became one with the cosmos in Bloodborne, who started the Age of Dark in Dark Souls 3, who ended the war in Sekiro. I just put the controller down and wouldn't go back to the game until a few weeks later, where I woke up around 3 AM, started the game, and after quite a few tries, I finally beat Manus. These kinds of hardships and overcoming them is the core philosophy of these games. You start as nothing, and you have to fight your way against impossible odds to become powerful enough to change the world. Now on paper, this is nice and all, but the thing is, just like I quit when things have become too frustrating with Manus, many other first-timers quit for good, and usually at a much earlier stage of the game. On one hand, I do understand the thematic coherence for this level of difficulty,
Fated, it seems, to die in obscurity.
and I adore the extremities the developers went through in order to achieve that. But on the other hand, it breaks my heart thinking of all of the potential player base lost due to them losing patience or hope of ever finishing the game.
Oh no! Egg!
So many iconic and artistically dazzling locations, moments, and storylines that the access to is blocked by either a hard boss or a hard level. There's a complete area called Ash Lake, for example, that most people miss because it's sitting behind a hidden wall, inside a tree, in one of the most dangerous areas of the game. And only people reading up guides online or obsessed with hidden walls usually find it. Here is where Elden Ring surpasses all of the earlier titles. In the earlier games, if I was stuck in an area or a boss, my options for progressing were pretty limited. It was always either I get good, go farm in some earlier areas, or I try out another route, which wasn't always an option. But if it was, usually it was one that is as challenging if not more so. That's why I quit Dark Souls on multiple occasions. In Elden Ring, this is not the case. Its open world design negates all of those disharmonious experiences of attempting to run against a brick wall. If an open world boss is hard, ignore it and run. An area too challenging, go a different direction. The options are seemingly countless. The first area alone can be seen as an entire miniature open world game. But don't take my word for it when you have this accurate video by the great video game Donkey who's elaborated on that.
To the top of the map, and you go,
Whoa! This game be.
Now this abundance of options is the perfect way to be more accessible to new players while keeping it challenging for Souls veterans. A new player can choose to ignore the first boss the game throws at them and go explore instead, something which the game highly encourages, with runes, spirit ashes, weapons and spells, all of which make the game much more manageable to a struggling first-timer. You'll always have something to do, somewhere to explore and level up along the way, instead of having to grind oh so many knights and balders in order to stand the slightest chance against those damn snakes in Sen's Fortress. This kind of bottleneck where you have to grind in order to progress simply does not exist in Elden Ring, or is very limited. There's this trend nowadays of making an open world game just for the sake of having this as a feature. I guess it helps marketing the game and increases the sales numbers, because video games that offer more options to the player sound good on paper. What could be wrong with more freedom and immersion? But most open world games these days are basically big empty areas with tons of collectibles and carbon copied quests, which are spread seemingly at random around these great fields of nothingness. Albeit gorgeous to look at times, most of them do nothing to progress the game. They're just there for the sake of forcibly adding more game time. That's why I usually try to avoid open world games, because I know that what waits behind the promise of full freedom is actually boredom and repetition. Look at Horizon Zero Dawn. The game starts with great immersion and seemingly a good storyline. But after playing the beginning part of the game and reaching the part where you're free to explore, I just noticed how empty and monotone the world actually is. I just couldn't keep playing, and I let the game go as fast as I bought it. Elden Ring thankfully breaks this trend, and I kinda wish that other game developers and companies would take note of how it does that. What Elden Ring gives the player, in my opinion, is one of the greatest open world experiences, and it couldn't have done that without building on the earlier FromSoft titles. What makes this game's open world so different is a very simple design philosophy and application. FromSoft took the linear level design it had already mastered in titles like Demon's Souls and Dark Souls 1 and spread it out in chunks throughout this big open world. In earlier games, the linear level design allowed for a more coherent experience, both in story progression and the way it guides the player to naturally explore the levels and uncover their secrets, rewarding curiosity with items, secret areas, and weapons. There were still options for discovery where sometimes you could take another path, but they were still limited in the sense that each path was also linear. You enter a new area, fight your way through the monsters and traps, die a few times on the way, unlock a shortcut, and then beat your head against the area boss. Rinse and repeat. In Elden Ring, they basically do the same thing both in the micro sense of it, where the linear level design is inside the frame of a dungeon, or a castle, or a cave, or a mine, or an entire underground city.
Eternal. Nukon. Eternal.
City! They call it
Nukon.
what?
Eternal.
City!
Nukon.
What? The
Eternal.
City!
Nukon.
What? The
Eternal.
City!
Nukon.
In those areas, the whole level design is the same as the usual formulaic design, where you go through a pretty rough level, with its share of traps, ambitions, and items, find the shortcut to the fog gate, and of course, it all ends with a boss fight. Here, however, we also have a macro design to consider too. Since the game is set in an open world where the player is allowed to travel basically anywhere within the confines of a huge area and sometimes also traverse between areas with relative ease, the game has to adapt its level design to fit the setting. Elden Ring does this so well. It basically knits the different linear areas with big spaces that allow exploration, where there's always a treasure, enemy fortress, or a world boss to fight. Imagine the naturality of it. You're just going about, riding your horse, you see a bunch of enemies, and you innocently go in to check it out. And then suddenly a dragon lands out of nowhere, killing everybody in sight, you and your foes alike, in a classic FromSoft manner. Hell, the game even has bosses that spawn only at a specific time of the day. All of these elements smashed together lead to a feeling of exploring a world that is alive, where everywhere you go you can expect either an encounter, a dungeon, or a world event. There's always more to do and it never reaches a point where it's repetitive. The level of thinking and effort that went into making this world feel as natural as possible, at least as far as the exploration experience is concerned, is tremendous and truly paradoxical. The game keeps you invested from beginning to end, wanting to keep exploring, keep moving further, and wishing there would be no end to this amazing journey. If you like this video, please consider smashing the like button, leave a comment, and make sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss out on upcoming videos both of Elden Ring and other games as well. Until next time.